Hey, welcome back to the Rhetoric Warriors podcast, where we are patrolling the streets, the rhetorical streets, looking for it's like noir rhetoricians. We're looking for all the villains out here. Jack the Word Ripper. I am Dr. Dan, rhetorician, comedian, I don't know. PhD in rhetoric. What's that?
Rhetorician?
Rhetorician.
Or rhetorician, yeah. Put a T in there.
Everybody adds a T, like mathematician, I think is where that comes from. But it's rhetorician. So that's what I do. PhD in rhetoric, late night comedy writer, founder of Rhetoric Warriors. On the podcast, I talk to comedians about their careers and their politics. Sometimes I turn them loose and uncensor them to see what we can find when comedians are uncensored. I also convert conservatives because the right worries me. So I have them on here and I talk nicely to them. I talk to persuasion pros, everything from marketers to people who are out there fighting to get their social issues heard. And that's cool. And I feature rhetoricians. This podcast has more rhetoricians than any podcast in the world. Today, my guest is I don't know, I'm going to categorize her to start as a comedy pro, but man, she's got so many different things that I like. It's like all these flashpoints when I was going through her bio. We could talk for a long time. She's an author, stand-up, comedy writer, producer, politicalista, social issue person. And she had a flare up in the social media a while back. All interesting stuff. Tess Rafferty.
Hi. Oh, that's my alarm that says it's time to start this podcast. So
nice.
Perfect.
You hit it right on.
So thank you so much for having me here, Dan. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah. It's always fun to talk to like comedy again, sort of. I think we've maybe met a couple of times now at the Hollywood Improv. I used to haunt that place just as a hangout, and I think I probably met you there with Chris, but we've never worked together or anything. I don't think.
I don't think so either. But we were all of an era in the early aughts where that's where you went just to hang out a couple nights a week.
Yeah, well, that's literally how I got my first job. I would go down to the bar at the Hollywood Improv, and I would send out a mass email. Text wasn't a big thing yet. And just say, hey, I'm going to be down the bar if anybody wants to come hang out. And I just told everybody I was looking for a writing job. And Rich Williams, eventually, he's like, hey, man, I heard you're looking for a writing job. I'm like, yeah, you know why you heard that? Because I say that to everybody.
Yeah, it's really, man, that's a thing. Still to this day, that's how you get a job. And it's such, God damn it. I always say, I'm sorry, can I say that?
Oh, yeah, you can say whatever you want.
It's such I always say to people, if you had told me 20 years ago that I could have achieved a certain level of success in a difficult field like this, and I'd still be humping it, like sending out emails, trying to get people to see something or go to something or whatever, I don't, I probably still would have done this because I was dumb, but it's like, yeah, that's like a punch in the gut. Like when you're sending, like, hey, don't know if you've heard of anything, because they haven't.
Right. No, it's hard. I mean, it's that old line. I think I first heard Robin Williams say it, that the work of Hollywood isn't the work, it's getting the work.
Yeah.
And you are like, and very established people. Like I haven't been in LA for, I don't know, probably almost 10 years now, because I moved to Austin to raise my kids. And I worked distance for a while, but then for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I really haven't done anything local or in the town. And I see buddies of mine, people I know, they're super talented and they're just aging out of everything. Like they just, they're all still looking for work.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing about this business, and a trend I've really seen happen, where. And I get that, you have to stay sharp. You have to know what's in the zeitgeist, especially depending on if you're working on a pop show that delves into pop culture or whatever. I mean, just like you have to know what's going on in political news if that's the show you're working on. I get that, but the fear that older people, and when I say older, I mean late 30s and above in this town, don't understand, who people are or aren't going to get it. And that somehow someone who's never done this job is going to just pick up what they don't know, is really kind of like, it's I mean, it's insulting and it's crazy. And it's like, and I just see like, you know, people getting hired who don't know how to deal with production, don't know how to, you know, that something
Right.
has to be, that when you have changes, it has to go to the teleprompter operator. Otherwise, you know, your show's not getting done. And that there's sort of like also just a professional protocol in, you know, dealing with, you know, how you do that. And I don't know, you know, it's like, all right, I guess it's worth it for you. Like, you know, and it's always some like, you know, some guy himself who's not young in a hoodie, you know, trying to seem hip, telling you need to hire younger people. And it's like, let's open you up and count the rings on you.
It is
Yeah.
weird, like this whole thing recently of, you know, the right telling people they can't, what they can and can't teach in schools, you know, with the 1619, is it 1619 project? The critical race theory, you know, and it's almost like that's in Hollywood too, right? Like all of a sudden, instead of the merited people, the experienced people, and the somebody that's talented and ambitious about certain things, making the decisions, like all these things just pour into your decision making. You can't just hire, you know, it becomes a political event for you to hire somebody.
It really is. And as someone who didn't benefit from the old system all the time, you know, a lot, you know, was the one in the room, right? Like if I didn't get the female spot, then I didn't get a spot because
Right.
that was the one spot. You know, it's a really hard thing to navigate because I understand, I absolutely understand the need for more conscientiousness in who we're hiring, but then now it just seems like, you know, the one last bastion of bias is age. And because it's Hollywood, I mean, and by the way, this isn't unique to Hollywood. This is happening in every business.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know, it's happening to men too, across the board in every business. It happens to women about 5 years earlier on average. So of course, you know, we're still getting fucked, but you know, so are you at some point as a man. And it's what's happening everywhere, and it's egregious and awful, and it's against the law, but it's very hard to prove. And then even if you were to take them to court, now you've got that stink on you, and no one wants to hire you now. But it's, you know, it happens to us at a very young age, and it seems to be the only thing that's acceptable. You
Yeah,
know,
it's still, it's still hanging there, right? Where it's like, yeah, you know, I've seen this, and so I've worked in socially liberal institutions my whole life. I was a college professor for a long time, and at the time I came out, you know, white guys had gotten every job forever, and so totally down with my politics. I'm like, yeah, you should be hiring, you know, females and, you know, people of color and other ethnic, you know, other internationally, all this stuff. But in reality, you know, it shrunk my job possibilities down, maybe to where they should be. You know, maybe if I wasn't,
right,
you know, how dare you treat me like I should be treated?
yeah.
But, so I've always agreed with the politics, but it's also made my life more difficult. And I saw that in Hollywood too, like, right, socially liberal, and you've got to justify your hires, and it just expands age, gender, race, you know, it just expands endlessly.
Yeah, and it's a real, it's a very hard thing to fight, the ageism, because it's, you know, nobody, it's we're all terrified of copping to our actual age in this town. I don't do it, you know. I'm, you know, I give a range. You know, I know
12 to 24. That's what I am.
You know, you know, the cat's out of the bag. I don't think anyone thinks I'm under 40 at this point, which is fine, you know. But it's a hard thing to unify and fight against, because you're putting yourself in this group that nobody wants to be in, you know.
Yeah, no, it is. It's interesting. I haven't thought about this much, but so rhetoric is a study basically of highly organized messages with intent. It's like if you're going to be talking with intent, you know, you want to design your messages and make sure they have impact. And so if we were to go after age, you know, to take up for the aged in Hollywood, you know, you would design a message packet to try to deal with this. And you would, you know, show all the people suffering and the victimage of it. And you would do it just like pretty much all the other victim politics and all the other way those things are constructed, because the grooves have been built. But nobody's really doing that for old people.
Right. And by old people, we mean, you know, anyone past their 37th birthday.
Right. Yeah. I know.
And you know, and what's crazy is, again, it happens in Hollywood sooner. It's, you know, but it's happening in every business, and they have all their buzzwords, like doesn't fit in with the culture and everything. You know, all the ways they talk about it. We need fresh voices, you know, however they choose to discuss it. And you know, the thing is that where, you know, I'm going to talk about women, for example, although again, this is going to happen to men at some level too, but when you're talking about women in the workforce, you're talking about half the population who has never had financial parity with men ever in the workforce, statistically speaking. You know, I always get the one guy who wants to tell me about the one woman who made more money than he did. Like, oh, okay, thanks for that scientific, you know, explanation. So these women have never been able to even, you know, develop the wealth or the financial security that the men in their field have. They're often more educated than the men at their same level need to be. So that's, you know, they're taking on the financial burden of whatever that education cost as well. They get dinged if they leave the workforce to raise a family. So they either have to come back in, or then now they're taking on the financial burden of childcare on top of their job. So they're not accumulating that stuff at all. That means they can't, you know, save money for their retirement. They can't save money for their kids' education. If they don't have kids like myself, then it's like, oh, I can't go move in with a kid 30 years from now if they'll have me. Like, it's just me. I'm
Right.
just me paying for, you know, someone to come and, like, you know, do my dishes a couple of times a week or whatever, you know, the aides that come in and help you, you know, take. I don't want to paint the vulgar picture of that everyone goes to about diapers and everything.
The worst possible job that you can pay somebody to do.
I don't know why I settled on dishwashing.
I like it. No, it's safe. That's a good one.
Someone who comes in the house and helps you out because you're old and feeble and never had children and couldn't save for your retirement. So anyway, you can't make this, you're not accumulating this wealth. On top of it, we're going to stop when you can work even sooner based on your gender. So now it's like, good luck. I guess you're a greeter at Walmart, despite being a PhD or something or whatever It is. No offense to greeters at Walmart, but now you've got to pay for the rest of your life on minimum wage, which sucks. And then, by the way, you're going to live longer. As a woman, you're going to statistically live longer. Your healthcare is going to cost more. Your insurance is going to cover less than men on average.
So you're saying, I seem to maybe, you know, I seem to infer women have a hard time.
It's just like my retirement plan is like laying down on the curb and letting the crows poke my eyes out because I can't even afford to die in this country. And you know, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. I'm in a privileged class. It's so much harder for, you know, for so many other people.
Right, but it becomes this weird quilt of issues, like a cape. Like everybody has their cape. Like what issues are on your cape? And so, like, one of my issues, like even on this podcast, most of my friends are middle-aged white guys. That's who I worked with. That's who I went to school with, hung out with. So probably, I think I've had like almost 60 people as guests, and I think 48 of them have been middle-aged white guys. But so race and gender, definitely not much diversity. But then if you actually break down into the diversity, you know, itself, like I've had comedians versus politicians versus academics. My background is class. So I came from like working class Kentucky, you know, and I was the first person to go to college, and I've got all this sort of working classness that doesn't really get folded into the discussion nearly as much anymore, you know, the way it used to with Marxism and all that kind of stuff. And that's why when critical race theory comes back up and they go, oh my God, it has Marxist tendencies, and they're throwing communist and socialist around like they know what that means. I'm like, you know, that's been out of the discussion. That's been out of the cultural zeitgeist for quite a while. And I think it's been replaced strongly with gender and race and ethnicity and things like that. And they all just kind of come back up and they have to compete. They have to compete for limited spaces and resources. But I can't really walk in there and go, you should hire me because I'm from Kentucky.
I mean, it's you know, it's that thing that I try to educate people about when we use the word privilege in the current vernacular as we use it, is that, yes, like, we're not saying that you grew up. It's a hard thing that I've just typed it all out now and I just keep posting it. No one is saying you grew up in privilege, right? We're saying that you had certain privileges that you were born into that other people didn't, who may have grown up just the same as you, but they didn't have the privilege of walking into the room as a guy, walking into the room as a white guy, walking into the room as a straight white guy. You know, that afforded people still a leg ahead. You know, and you know, I think that it's a lot to unpack, and there's certain things that are non-starters for me in conversations with people. I think, sorry, I'm jumping around and I apologize.
No, that's okay. There's, like I said at the beginning, you have so much stuff.
Well, when we want to talk about rhetoric, this is a problem I'm seeing now, and I don't know what the answer is. And because on the one hand, I think we allowed the idea of nuance, of agreeing to disagree. I think that's what got us Trump. And what I mean is, I think when we tried to be like, oh, I want to accept the extreme Christian in my life who just believes things a little bit differently than we do. Well, you know, that ended up with women having their freedoms taken away, and these people vote. You know, so you can't. There's a certain point where you can agree to disagree, because the disagreement is over whether or not someone should have basic civil rights, whether or not someone should be allowed to vote, whether or not someone should have water online when they're voting. You know, like it's really like there's certain things that just have to be lines in the sand. And I think the fact that we tried to be inclusive of everything, or some people did, was what got us here. On the flip side, I don't want to even use the word left or anything, and I'm just going to say in the Democratic Party, there are people who think every hill is a hill to die on, and they can't discuss the nuances in it. Right. And that is doing, I will say that Bernie Sanders did far more damage to 2016 and our chance of getting of Hillary Clinton's campaign than the Republicans ever fucking did. Because
Bernie's really just a dyed in the wool, typical garden variety, you know, socialist flamethrower, Molotov cocktail thrower. His talk, so normal back in the 60s. Everybody was talking like that. But now it's been gone away from for so long, it comes back up and it just like, oh my God, how can somebody talk like this in public?
Bernie is your typical shithead guy who thinks a woman should do the work and pay for everything. I guess you could call that socialism, but he was kicked out of the fucking commune for not working enough. Like, that's who that guy is. He didn't even vote until he was almost 40, and it was for himself. You know, so it's like, I guess we could call that socialism, but my understanding of it, socialism, is we're all working towards the greater good and not just living on a commune, not paying child support or anything to the mother of my child, and, you know, and expecting everyone else to do the work for me until I slide into the mayor job at almost 40 years old. So, I mean,
so I have a question for you, because this is essentially like the under foundation of your, you know, your YouTube video about too much politeness has gotten us into trouble. Like and I talk about this a lot of times with democracy itself, that we need a democracy 2.0 because there are vulnerabilities built into democracy. There's vulnerabilities built into an unprotected public discourse. And all they've done is exploit it. And they started with, you know, back during Reagan, and they've just exploited the vulnerabilities, you know, with Newt Gingrich coming in and basically blocking government. So government didn't work. And then everybody yelling, government doesn't work. Like, well, yeah, you know, if you don't do government, it doesn't work. But, you know, to try to go in and do things so that you can avoid things like that, avoid people being able to come in and sort of grab space that they don't deserve. Like, you know, Bernie probably did, or, you know, the right grabbing, you know, cultural issues that they have nothing to do with and just use them as battering rams. You So the question is like becomes, and I think you hit on it for the people that are looking, for democracy and value all those things. How do you balance giving everybody the opportunity and then realizing, like I call Trump a rhetorical pirate. He basically, America had built a Porsche and he was a clown who just jumped in behind the wheel. And you could see it happening during the primary where he just got more and more popular. He shut everybody else up, out insulted everybody, and just took over. Yeah. And that's because it's sitting there for anybody to do that. So how do you go in and fix that? How do you protect it so that, the people who want to be fair aren't taken advantage of by the people who aren't going to be fair?
I mean, I think there's a lot of facets to it. And I don't know if any of them are helpful in the long run, because at the end of the day, well, what I mean is, like, first of all, that's a Republican Party issue. The Republican Party has let him take over. The Republican Party could have stopped this anywhere along the way, and they didn't. They saw him gaining ground because they've cultivated a party of bigots and dummies, and
sure.
they saw, and they saw that, like, that was what was resonating with people. It's like, hey guys, when you cut education, turns out people don't know how to think real well.
People, if you don't train people how to think, they don't just naturally think really well. Is that what you're trying to say?
Right. And there's this sense of anti-elitism. And I really think about it with George W. Bush, right? I think it started with the movie Forrest Gump, but that's another situation. Like, I think Forrest Gump paved the way for George W. Bush, but the Republican Party has been trading on this, like, we're just regular guys, we're not elitists. And it's like, I don't know when, studying hard and getting into good schools and becoming successful became a bad thing in our country, and elitism. And so, but like, it was like W was, a C student, and that was probably thanks to a fucking bribe, that he got C, and it's like, he's not that bright, and we made him president because he's just like me, and I want to have a beer with him. So we've been cultivating this thing in the Republican Party, or rather they have been, because they thought they could control it. And like Frankenstein, they couldn't control the monster,
Yeah, it turns out extremists are hard to control.
So at every place where they could have stopped it, they don't, and they still fucking refuse to. Like, to this moment, they don't want to look into 1-6, even though these guys came to kill Mike Pence. It's like they don't want to look at it. So they could have something to do with it, and it's why. Sure. I don't want to talk to anyone who still considers themselves a Republican. I don't care if you're just in it for the taxes. It's like, well, then get your fucking party in line or get out. Because if you're not getting them in line, you're complicit.
I agree. I agree with all that. Like, to me, it's, the logical stance is, hey, I cannot go hang around this stuff anymore. I cannot act like this is normal. I need to call this out. I need to make this aberrant and, not normalize it. For me, like when I do the converting conservatives, it's interesting to me because, so I tell people, and this is true at the beginning when I talk to them, I don't care what your belief systems are. I don't care if you're far, 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 far right. I don't care if you're far, far, far left of no property, pull down money, whatever. What I care about is the process you use to get there. And nobody's being taught process anymore. They are not being taught how to argue, or even like what I do, which is a conversion process, which one of the things is like, if you bring somebody on one-on-one, and I have power because I'm the podcaster, so I can kind of control them, which is very important when you're dealing with extremists. And I use a lot of interpersonal techniques to make them feel comfortable, and I don't go after their beliefs. I don't contradict them, because all that stuff would just trigger. And once somebody's triggered, you can't do conversion.
Right.
So it's more of a sophisticated way of bringing them along towards, a more acceptable position. But realistically, when you're just in public, and especially like you threw a video out there that got all these views, and everybody's like, oh my God, once that's coming at you, once that storm is coming at you, you can't localize it down to one person and make it humane. It's just this massive attack.
No, and I think, I mean, it's funny thing about the video, which is I wrote that on Facebook. And the day after, 2 days after we'll just call it November 8th, 2016. And this friend of mine, Steve Cohen, who's a director I've worked with on different things over the years, was like, I want to film this. And I was like, okay, how?
Okay.
Like, who wants to see that? Sure, I'm not doing anything besides crying. Why not?
Right.
But I was like, how are you going to do this? And who wants to watch 8? Because the full length thing is 8 minutes long. And the thing that Occupy Democrats put up, they edited down. It's got like 51 million hits, but even the 8-minute one had enormous amount of traction. And, I don't know, to me, and I know, like, we hear about a few people who came over and, whatever, who voted for Trump and changed their minds. But I just feel like, and no exchange I've had with anybody has changed this, is like, you're so far gone. Like, if I have to explain his racism to you and you're still thinking, well, let's wait and see, like, I don't know where we go from there.
Yeah, and it's an interesting challenge, right? Like my first book came out a couple of weeks ago, and I want to talk to you.
By the way, I just want to say I applaud you for being able to do it, for having the patience and in knowing how to approach it. I applaud you for that, by the way.
Well, it's what I do. I've been teaching rhetoric for 40 years and studying it and talking about it because it grabbed my brain when I was in my 20s in grad school. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of a software for actually doing work, positive work on people,
Yeah.
And so my first book came out, and it was essentially this idea of watching everybody just fail. And I'm like, that's not a good system. Don't keep failing. And it's called 21 Coliseums of Persuasion, because essentially the premise of the book is you're going to fail over here with logic when you're trying to out logic or even just bring people into logic with the right. So you have to move over to something else where you can win, and even like being able to create a good relationship with them that they're comfortable with and they don't feel attacked and they feel familiar and, all that kind of stuff. So then maybe down the line a little bit, you can start to do a little bit of persuasion, within logic. But most people can't do that. They go right to logic and everybody just explodes.
Yeah.
And like, understanding how to not trigger people emotionally is important in persuasion when you deal with people who've, been wounded or in an extreme state. And it's on both sides. Like my daughter's 21, super, super liberal. So sensitized. Like we were driving up to an intersection here in Austin, and, the homeless guy sitting there on his milk crate. She doesn't really say anything about him, but he's got a dog, next to him. And she's like, oh. And I'm like, your heart is just so, easily won by dogs. And she wanted to give the money to him so he would feed his dog. I'm like, well, why do you think he has the dog? It's to get 19-year-old girls to go, oh, Dad, give him some money.
I've never, that's a very cynical way of looking at that.
Not so much like, rhetoricians are always just what helps you, like, and those guys
I'm sure it's also very, a very meaningful connection to have as well. Like, I don't know, I think about my pets and I think it's
absolutely, it's super powerful to people. And so, like, if you were doing conversion,
they talk about emotional support animals, and I'm sure if you're experiencing homelessness, I'm sure that's your connection. That's your family on the street. That's your companion.
I'm not being so cynical as to say that's the only reason they have the dog. I'm just saying, like, for my daughter, it's a really strong messaging factor, and what I try to do is arm people who I think who have good things at heart, like democracy and fairness to all the groups and all that stuff, with more sophisticated. I want to give them a dog, so they can actually be effective with these people who are going to go out and vote badly if you're not effective with them.
It's hard because I think it makes sense. But I think that there's like, I hear that a lot from people about their, my catchphrase on Facebook is the racist aunt. I mean, it's a lot of different things. It could be a parent or a friend or whatever. A lot of times they're an older person, but not always. And it's like, she's a really good person. And it's like, well, is she? like I get that she's good to you. Lots of horrible people are good to the people they love. And also, what are you doing? What are you doing to try to bring them around? And, because at some level it's on us. It's a really, interesting thing. I read something about, about Facebook fights, right? And getting involved in, let's say at any kind of squabble on social media, that you're not doing it or because you're going to change the person's mind that you're arguing with. You're doing it because someone that you don't know is reading this, and you're giving them confidence in something that they already think, or potentially changing their mind about something they think. And I mean, it's sort of to your point, but it's the other stuff that's like, you're talking Jedi ninja level, like stuff that you're doing. I bow down to it.
Well, it's just, I make this argument all the time, and I've got a guy that he's a anti-vaxxer, and he's a public figure and anti-masker, and I talk to him quite a bit online, and he's releasing a podcast episode that I did with him tomorrow about Tony Fauci. The right decided they could get traction by attacking Fauci and turning him into a villain. And so that's what they've been doing, and it's been effective. And this guy's totally anti-Fauci. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just slow down and let me take you through process. So here's bad Fauci, here's good Fauci. All right. So those are our options.
Yeah.
And in the middle is process. Like, how are you going to figure out bad versus good Fauci? And I'm like, you have no training in process. So what's the validity of your outcome? It's probably bad. It's not necessarily bad, but I had to take them through it so slowly because people want to balk so hard about being trained, which he didn't sign up to take a course from me. But I told him when I got on his podcast, I'm going to teach you about this. And so he agreed to the social contract for that,
Yeah. It's
let's switch, because I want to talk about your book. I told you we could get off on a million things, which is super fun. So, but let's talk about some of your writing stuff, because the thing I like about writing is that it's just, you write your book, right? You write it.
Yeah.
You don't have a bunch of people going,
yeah.
Arr, arr, arr.
Yeah. I love it because it is, well, first of all,
tell us what you've got. Give us a little bit of your author background.
So I did a memoir almost 10 years ago now called Recipes for Disaster, which was just, a very basic memoir of dinner parties I threw, what went wrong, who ended up crying. And it was always me, usually, sort of that chaotic thing, because I developed a real, my husband, Chris, and I were both huge cooks. I think I love about entertaining and cooking and planning a meal is that it's very relaxing in a lot of senses for me when things aren't going wrong. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy the process of making yourself something and being like, I just did this and it's delicious. And it's satisfying in a way that writing isn't creatively, because you write something and then, as you know, nobody reads it, or people read it and hate it, and right. There's no end to it, right? There's always going to be dinner. In writing, it's like, I don't know, this thing could be in turnaround for 5 years, or no one could read it, or it can never get made, or it can get made and changed and whatever. And so I like that process of it. And I also I really like community. So I was always, once I got to the place where I could have people over and I had a space to entertain in, we were always doing it, which is a really lovely thing and a beneficial thing for all of us. I think we all crave community, which is why we end up with these, with QAnon and different things, and
Yeah, that's
scary
true.
Reddit groups.
That's a good insight. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
So, but then there's also are you taking on more and is it getting stressful? And, are you holding yourself up to ridiculous standards, which I've been known to do. So I did a book on that. And then I started writing a murder mystery a couple of years ago because I just love murder mysteries.
Which let me stay on the first one just for a minute.
Sorry. I don't have it here. I didn't, that's stupid. Yeah.
Just because like my daughter's in France right now. She's finishing her final year of college in France. And I sent her your blog about Italy boot camp.
Oh, cool.
Because you write so well about that stuff. You can tell how much you love that place. You can tell how much you love your food. It just comes through so strongly in, the way that you write about this stuff. So, I mean, I just want to point that out because I don't want you to breeze past just how good that writing really is. It's super fun to read.
Thank you so much. That means a lot because it's some of the stuff I do that I enjoy that doesn't get noticed as much. And there's not, especially some of the food stuff I do, there's, I'm not a professional cook. I'm not a chef by any means, but there's Elizabeth David is a British writer who used to do a lot of essays about food, about about kind of its place and how to its place in our homes. And she would have recipes, but they were all very much like, you just take some leeks and you put them in a pan and you add some cream and cheese, and they were or not, like they were very casual, which that's where good food comes from. All good food that we now pay hundreds of dollars to eat places was always once peasant food. It was always people getting by with what was on hand, with what they could afford, trying to feed more people than they had.
Right.
And that to me is so much like, it's being able to sustain yourself and others and being respectful towards food and not wasting. And I love that aspect of it, which I've been doing a lot of. I have a blog called Recipes for Resistance that is, sometimes there's recipes and sometimes it's just like, sometimes it's other musings. Sometimes it's like, here's what I started during the Kavanaugh trial, not trial. He should have been on trial, right? The Kavanaugh hearings. Like, hey, this is what I did this week to keep from losing my fucking mind that women are still here in 2019.
Yeah, it's crazy. So like, I'm sure you watch like the Netflix Chef's Table and those shows, those little mini documentaries.
It's so funny. I watched some of them. I used to watch Bourdain a lot. And Stanley Tucci's series was amazing. The episodes, his what was it called? Finding Italy, or Searching for Italy, that he just did on CNN. I enjoy some chef shows, but not as much as you would think. And I think it's just when I watch TV, I have a real desire for escape and narrative. I don't watch as much documentary as you would think I would. Reality. I do love British Baking Show, which is amazing. And I remember when everyone was telling me, it was right after the 2016 election, that I had to watch it. And everyone I know was like, it's just the nicest show. It's everybody's really nice. And you look at that show. Have you ever seen it?
I've never watched that one. I've watched all the chef's tables and all that with my daughter, like all the travel, like Restaurants in Paradise or something, where they go and they fix a restaurant.
Yes.
Because the places are amazing. And now she's basically going around Europe, going to all the places that we've seen. Like we watched Malta on one of them, and it's like, oh my God, this place is amazing. And she's like, I'm going there. She sends me tickets. Look, I'm going to Malta. I'm like, good for you.
I think I saw the one in Malta. I'm trying that you're talking about. It's it's such a great way to see the world and get curious about the world too, I think.
Yeah, and they do that while you're talking about, like, they infuse everyone. It's always the same story, essentially, especially on the chef's table, about I went back and I rescued the local cuisine and I, elevated that. And now everybody, is eating off pine bark and, and it's really cool. And it's like, yeah, it is cool. it's fun to watch those, the cultural, foundations come up into the food and they weave that story together, and the photography is just beautiful. So
Oh, yeah.
I've always enjoyed those.
Did you see the chef's table about the guy in Patagonia?
Oh my God. We have two favorites. That one and the guy went to the Amazon, the guy from Brazil, who's just a punk rocker. And like he grabbed a fish out of the Amazon that was a tank, and it took him like an hour and a half to descale it. It's like, yeah, no wonder people don't eat this thing.
It's the Patagonia one, almost it feels like a parody of a chef's table. Like if I was going to write a sketch, I would write that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so gorgeous. That guy's clearly playing, he's clearly a media figure playing,
Oh yeah, he's like on the front of his boat or something, like, and like
a great man,
posed, and yeah.
So they're funny from narrative, the narrative tropes that they use to tell those stories. It's always the same cycle, but it is that sense of grounding things in food, and it has a simplicity, like you said, like with writing. It's an endless number of people flooding in to give you opinions about their experience of your writing, but not everybody gets to show up at your dinner and tell you about, the quiche that you made. Just a couple of people.
it's and just into the theme of this podcast, Vice President Kamala Harris held the bipartisan Senate women's dinner at her house. I believe it was last night. That's when I saw the pictures, and brought everyone together. And this is something that I believe the women in the Senate have been doing for some time. It's a bipartisan get together that they have. And she brought everyone together over food. And she, it's much documented that she loves to cook. And it's something that everybody was able to do despite how bipartisan and polarized things are right now. And hopefully we can, I don't know, pass the Paycheck Fairness Act or something as a result of it someday, or
here, I think the women's issues, y'all are shooting too low. I think you ought to go for reparations. Like you couldn't vote for 144 years, I think, here in this country. So you should put a bill forth that, men don't get to vote for the next 150 years, maybe tack on another 50 as penalty. Women are the only one to get to vote for the next 200 years. And just see how that works. Like we've done it the other way. I think it's time to, experiment. So I think you guys need to go bolder, ask for more.
Ask for more. Yeah. Mandatory vasectomies.
Yeah. All that stuff. Like, I mean, you're looking for equality. No, superiority. Let's try. Maybe they'll downgrade you to equality. You got to shoot higher.
Well, it's reminiscent of the RBG quote, right? That she said, like, when is it going to be fair? And she said, when there's 9 women on the Supreme Court. And somebody said something, well, how's that fair? She goes, well, there was 9 men for years and no one thought that was fair. Like,
yeah, nobody ever said a word about that. No, I'm totally into this idea that, the entire government, maybe for the next 30 years, should only be female. Just throw it, put it out as a law.
Only women are voting. Yeah.
And you can't tell me for like, it would be a better country.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I think, I just think, the women I know how to do things. And I don't mean to, I know this is, I know like I get it. I'm married to a white guy. I get that there's a lot of anti-white guy rhetoric and that I have participated in it on many occasions. But it's like everyone I know has got the same story of like, I had to tell my husband where the towels were, in the house we've both been living in, or my husband calls taking care of the kids babysitting. I have like found my husband's glasses that were in the pocket of the pants that he was wearing. It's very like, I think women are built to multitask. I have theories about it. I don't know if they're true because I am not a scientist, but it's just so much more of like, we got some rap of being emotional along the way. And yet the women I know are so much more inclined to be solution oriented and able to kind of get there. And it's not, obviously, it's not to say every woman or anything like that, but I just
doesn't it just really to say that women are emotional? Isn't that really just saying men are emotionally stunted?
Yeah, yes. Or the flip side is like we complain that like Hillary Clinton sounds robotic. And it's like, no, she's actually remaining really calm, and you don't like that either. So
Yeah, she had some challenges. I really liked Hillary for a lot of reasons, but I think as a public communicator, she had some challenges. Like compare her to her husband, like how smooth and charming that guy was for so long. I mean, just the ability to smile while you're, doing policy talk and things like that. It's those public skills that you see like in some comedians, as soon as they walk on stage, everybody starts to laugh. I've got a buddy who used to walk up in a blue mechanic's jumpsuit and just stand there. And the whole audience would just die laughing because he's about 135 pounds and looked like he's been kicked in the head his whole life. And he just stood there and he's like, what the fuck are you laughing at?
yeah.
So everybody's got public advantages and disadvantages that, I thought Hillary had a hard time with in some ways. I also would have made her like they need a hardcore insult comic to write some lines, right?
Well, I mean, and she has like a really wonderful sense of humor.
She does.
Too. Yeah. And she, now that the gloves are off and she can just be whoever she wants on Twitter.
I wish she was so much more appealing when the gloves were always off. She comes across so well when she's just real and she's like, you know what, fuck you and your right-wing conspiracy bullshit. I want to hear that side of Hillary.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I love it now, and I'm glad she can be that person. I just think she was so, damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
With
most slandered person in history, right? Nobody's been slandered more than Hillary for 30, 40 years in public.
And it's so, so that she couldn't really, she couldn't be that person. She had to walk a tightrope the whole time. And there's just this, the way we grade our women on a curve. And again, this goes back to, it's really all of a piece of how we look at things. If we love somebody, we will excuse any fault they have, but then there's other people. And if we're not on board, every fault they have becomes, well, I can't support this person anymore. There was a lot, like I saw, and everybody's just really looking for a fight. There was, the first thing that comes to mind, but it happens with everybody. It happens with everyone out there is, Kristen Gillibrand missed the vote on the paycheck fairness vote. So everybody I know kicks off, like people who've supported her, like I'm done with her. And it's like, okay, like let's see beyond the headline. It's bad optics. Yes. Guess what? Like the news loves bad optics, but let's see that this was never going to pass. We needed 60 votes. Okay. So her missing the vote, well, she should have been there. Should have been a unified front. There's a little arcane bit of knowledge, and we could talk about how our government is built to not work for days, but like you can't reintroduce a bill if you voted for it the first time.
Yeah. See, there you go. It's a nice little, right? She's got a super in. She was playing the game.
So, and apparently it's why, like somebody explained it to me, Harry Reid used to abstain or whatever at the last minute if he knew something wasn't going to pass. And so again, the big picture, can we not, but no, we're not, we're not built that way, or we haven't evolved into being that way. So,
and again, it's kind of what you said earlier, like we aren't trained to even know that stuff about our government. People are like, what?
Right.
The media doesn't educate. Every once in a while, you'll get a little bit of education leak into the media, but it's not an educator. It's just a provocateur. I mean, it's just trying to make you watch. That's what it does. You know what it's like. Like when you worked at the Soup or whatever, the more provocative lines are the ones that sort of explode. The things that really push the boundaries are the things that explode.
It's in the same thing in comedy, really. And, so it's an interesting thing to, it's a really interesting thing that I think a lot about, given our current culture.
All right, I'm going to pull you back to your book again because I want to
Sorry. Yes,
no, I knew this would happen. Sorry, I get interested in something else and we just wander off. Let's talk about your new book.
Yes. Okay. So I love murder mysteries. And I read murder mysteries like they're pie the day after Thanksgiving. Like I just like go through them. And so I was in Italy a couple of years ago. You know, my husband and I like to travel there, and we've always talked about different places we're always like, this place feels like the beginning of an Agatha Christie novel. Because we're at a hotel and it's very international, and someone comes in who, you know, looks very wealthy or wants to charter a plane to, you know, to Czechoslovakia that night or whatever. It was actually Dubrovnik in the real story that happened. And so I was like, yeah, somebody should write that. Like, and then I was like, maybe I should write that. So I wrote a book called Under the Tuscan Gun, which is that's a photo my husband took from his drone. He's a very good amateur photographer.
Oh wow, look at that.
The blood is fake, but everything else is real.
Cool.
And then I just did a follow-up called I did a novella called Buon Fatale that came out for Christmas. Because in mysteries, there's a lot of mystery authors in their series. There's like, they'll always put like a novella or short story out that's holiday themed, kind of as a little extra. And I just finished the first draft of the third one, so which takes place in Bologna. So
nice.
Yeah.
Is that like like an industry now that you've got to learn? Like you got to start to promote? Are you starting to try to make that a career? Or is it just like, I'm never going to make money at this, but it's fun?
Oh God, I want to make money at something else so that I can pay someone to make money at this one. I got to be honest. This is the 2 decades of humping it that like there are people who do very well with self-publishing, and it's a whole industry unto itself, and there's ways to market and things you have to know about, and it's a thing that I don't have a natural affinity for, so I have to force myself to look at it and learn. And while also trying to write in television, like while also trying to work at 3 other side hustles, including what's supposed to be my main side hustle, like it's a lot to deal with. So I'm kind of like, and I'd rather write it than market it. I mean, you know, so
yeah, it's a weird game. Like my partner, my marketing agency here in Austin has a book publishing arm that he's had for a long time. So he publishes books every once in a while for himself and a couple other things. So he just published my book for me. And, you know, at this point, like I do tiny promotion for it. But I have another book that's going to be much more commercial. And I used to have an agency in LA and, you know, lit agency, and I could, you know, go that route, but it just sounds so exhausting.
The book business, I like to compare to the cherry orchard a little bit. It's because my first book, Recipes for Disaster, was published through a division of St. Martin's, and that, you know, I got a small advance for and everything, but I don't recommend it. Like I don't recommend going through a publisher, and everybody wants something that either feels legitimate or they feel like someone's going to be there doing the marketing for them. And the reality is that anyone will tell you, you have to hire your own publicist, which basically takes up the entire advance that you've been given. And there's not a lot of support from the publishing company. Right. So you're like someone like Lena Dunham or Hillary Clinton or whatever. And so we had a hard time. I have a lit agent. She's wonderful. We had a hard time getting people interested in the book because they don't know what to do with a funny murder mystery. And like literally we'd hear things like, we don't know which shelf it goes on. And so finally I was like, well, again, when I was talking about how like there's always dinner, like you always know you're going to make something and then get to eat it. I was like, I'm tired of having this manuscript that I've written and that I'm hoping like the next thing's going to be it. I mean, I had this at one point, it was under option by Warner Brothers, and I still was like having a hard time finding a publisher because everyone wants just to wait and see and stuff. And so right. I was like, I'm tired of having this thing sitting on my laptop. I want to just get it out in the world. And especially when I'm waiting for the right buyer. And I know that the right buyer, it's like marriage, right? It doesn't mean that your problems are over when you get the right buyer. It's just another set of problems.
What about a play like with Knives Out and stuff like that? There's kind of a, kooky murder mystery history in theater.
Oh yeah, doing it, well, no one's been doing theater for the last, I mean, yeah, I could write it as a radio play and put it on Zoom, and I still might. I've been doing some book clubs on Zoom, which is great. I kind of had my own virtual book signing where I'm going to be doing a reading tonight. I had Jackie Cation host it because I know she's just such a great, much like yourself, she's a really wonderful interviewer and just naturally curious. And we showed some photos. So I've been trying to figure out ways to make it, to be, to do it differently since we have this technology that we're embracing right now.
Right. Yeah, it does suck though, man. Like you have all the like people don't understand like the battery, the energy it takes to actually do good creativity, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, so that's like 10% of what we need. Now the other 90% is going to be talking to people constantly about your book. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen.
I mean, just figuring out, memes and ads and loading up your Twitter and your IG every day to, so that you're constantly putting it out there in case anyone's forgotten. And I guess when it came down to it, I thought I can do that, or I could write another book.
Right.
And have like that become like, if I get 4 of these, maybe that's something,
Yeah.
Maybe once there's another one for someone to read after the last one, maybe that's my path, I guess. Yeah.
I'm the same way. I'm a content horse. I love the content. I just write content all the time and I end up shaping it. And it's kind of nice. Like I know I can get it published, through an Austin publisher because I'm friends, partners with the guy. But you tell people this marketing agency that I've been doing for the last 5 years, it's amazing. Like even when you get over into business outside of entertainment, and I was in academics before that, but I never wanted to work with business people. And I was right. That was a correct, field. But like you get over there and like they come to you with marketing want. And it's exactly this. So they're like, we've got this company, we have this paying group of paying doctors that we work for. They've never marketed. They've made money for 20 years because they've been handed patients from a major hospital as referrals. Well, somebody pissed off the hospital and now no longer they want to refer them. So now they're going to market.
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah.
They're like, hey, if we give you like $5,000, how quickly can we get results? I'm like, so here's what I want you to think of. You want to build an art museum. Okay. Why do people go to art museums? Like when you go to the MoMA in New York, what do you go see? Starry Night, right?
Yeah.
Like that's there. It's there. So you're telling me like you want me to build you an art museum and make you a Starry Night that can actually cut through all the clutter for $5,000. I'll tell you what. Put 2 more zeros on there, for $500,000, I can build all this for you. And they're like, it's really, that's what it is. Like you have to get attention and you have to get it out there and it has to be on every platform. It's a thing.
It's really kind of, we're having this issue. It's being talked about a lot in the WGA, or maybe not in the union, but certainly being talked about among the members about free work and how we have slid into like nobody expected, like there's all this stuff we're being asked to do before we see check 1. And because it's all on spec and nothing's been sold, we might not see check 1.
Right.
And so here's an interesting thing about it is that, and it all comes back to knowing your worth, right? But so a lot of these places that want to develop with you and don't want to pay you or come to you with like a very vague idea, right? Like something about couples or a bar, or whatever. Maybe witches. That was one I got once. So
maybe witches. I like
maybe
it.
You do a 25-minute doc pitch, right? Which is, 8 or 9 pages. You've probably written twice that much, just honing it in on what, you've got a fully conceived of show. You've got storylines, you've got season arcs, you've got character development, you've got all these things. You've contextualized it, like why this is the show or what's the in emotionally for the audience. You've done all this work. And then they're like, we're going to go with someone else, or we don't like this take. And these are all things you've made up yourself. So So I always go to my lawyer after this, like, I liked this. Like, this was all my original work. I want to do something with this. And what my lawyer says is that, you know, who owns it is nebulous, right?
That's crazy, right?
Right. Even though I have worked for free and done this, you know, and like, this is what you pay a lawyer for, and I'm grateful for it. He has to worst case scenario it. So I go, well, I get that they can come after me, but it seems like even if I had to split it with them, half of something's better than all of nothing, right? He's like, it's not that simple. They might still be working on their idea about horses or, you know, baseball or whatever the fuck. And if you're doing a baseball idea, they could try to get ownership of yours and then kill it because they don't want it to compete with theirs. So, you know, he said, like, get something in writing that says that anything you do is yours. So it's a very simple, like, when I boiled it down to this in my head, it's, and somebody else had suggested the very astute, you know, that, you know, when you take these meetings, because everybody's afraid to say no or talk about money, it's like, is there development money? Right. So and then there never is. So you go no. And then they say no. And then you go, well, then I'm going to need it in writing that everything I do for you, I own. And at that point, it's now I haven't tried this yet, but in my head, it's a very simple thing of, otherwise you're telling me that I'm making nothing and you own what I'm doing for free.
Yeah.
And we can all agree that's fucked up, right? Like, but it's people don't, you know, it takes us it takes us into middle age to be able to know our worth and find a way to contextualize it for other people.
Well, and get them to give you the meetings after you say that.
Yes, there's that. I mean, did you have luck with your doctors, or were they like, we're going to pay an intern to get us an Instagram account?
Oh, they hired us, you know, it's always the same thing. Like they choke you with not enough money, and then they get upset that they don't get results. I'm like, yeah, I told you, you know, like, we can build this for you. Basically, you're building it 3% at a time, 3% a month. So, you know, in 12 months, maybe it'll be a third of the way built. And people don't accept amateur or unbuilt messaging. Like, we're trained as a culture to only expect fully professionalized, realized messaging. So they're going to look at your stuff and go, I don't know who these guys are. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a constant battle. And I understand, like, selling marketing, or, you know, people putting up marketing money is just hope money. That's all it is. It's a hard trigger to pull, you know? So I get that why they're hesitant about it, but there's no other option. I started hearing Austin, like, you know, your issue about Hollywood. I'm like, for me to have a meeting with you, you know, I'll have a meeting, and then if you want me to do anything, I have to be prepaid for everything.
Yeah.
And because Austin, it's even worse. You know, it's all the sort of people trying to get going and promising you back end money. And I'm like, nah, I don't do that.
Yeah. Guess what? My mortgage doesn't take back end money. They don't take potential or possibilities or contacts, you know?
Yeah. And I'm like, I like it. I like writing my own stuff. You know, I can do that and offer myself back end money, but
yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'll pay myself on the back end if it actually does come true. So.
Right. And I won't have to get a lawyer to pick through the shady details of how you hid money from me.
Yeah, I don't miss Hollywood for that stuff in a lot of ways. I miss the creativity. I miss hanging out with people like you and Chris, and, you know, the energy and kind of synergy of being around real creatives and comics. But all the energy you spend on the side stuff and trying to get your way through it all, I don't miss that too much.
No, it's really not fun. You know, I feel like when I talk to friends who work in other businesses, and, you know, maybe it's not as intense or maybe it's not as frequent, but it's a lot of the same stuff.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
Everybody's got a boss coming in who has less experience than them and thinks they know what they're doing. And, you know, it's a lot of this, like you said, you're trying to get this guy to understand your worth as a marketer. And then, you know, the thing about fast, good, or cheap, you know,
that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you can have 2 out of the 3. So it's like, yeah, he wants fast, good, and cheap, and they don't know that they can't, it's what most of these things always boil down to. Yeah, it can be good and cheap, but not fast, or, fast and cheap, but not good. But yeah, they don't.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
there seems to be no place where you just get on the luge and you just slide right down to success. Like there's no speed, I'm on the bobsled. Here I go.
But it's a certain, like, you don't decide you're going to open a lemonade stand and then go, I don't have money for lemonade. I don't have money for lemons, or,
right.
I don't want to pay for water, or whatever it is, or, I don't have any chalk to write the sign on the front.
Yeah, there are these creative industries are abstractions to people. They don't really understand what these builds are, what it takes and all that kind of stuff. My father was a home remodeler and general contractor. And so nobody would have ever given him money. Like, I'm going to give you $2,000. Can you go ahead and build my house? And then if I like it,
yeah.
I'll pay you the rest. Right. That just sounds stupid to everybody, but they'll do that with creative stuff all day long,
Oh yeah. It was my joke about like how everybody was like, hey, you're a writer. Is that hard? Because I had an idea, and it's like, I would never say to my doctor, like, hey, like, how's surgery? Because it seems kind of fun. And I was thinking about just showing up tomorrow and seeing like if I could just cut someone open. And
turns out I can. Look at that. I was just naturally good at cutting people.
Yeah. Yeah. My friends say I'm good at the steak. So I just figured it would, like, translate or whatever.
Right. Well, this has been super fun. I don't want to keep you too long. I enjoyed talking to you very much. Like I said, you have a lot of things that hook up with stuff that I'm interested in. So
me as well. I know. I can't believe it's already been over an hour and everything. This was a pleasure. Please, if there's anything else you ever want to discuss, let me know. I'd love to do it. And it was great seeing you and everything.
Yeah, I love circling back around and honing in on something. So promote your book one more time. Tell people where they can find you.
You can go to Amazon. It's Under the Tuscan Gun is the first in the series by Tess Rafferty. I'm at tessrafferty.com. I'm at Tess Rafferty on Twitter, at the Tess Rafferty on Instagram. And I have a Substack called Recipes for Resistance.
Very nice. So there you go. Go out and find Tess Rafferty. She's really talented and she writes about cool stuff. So go experience the Tess Rafferty approach to life and food. All right. I will talk to you soon. Thanks again very much.
Thank you very
much. That is the Rhetoric Warriors podcast. As always, get out there and persuade people. They kind of need it.